My mother kicked me out to focus on her twins. 18 years later, she attacked me on my doorstep, and I got a restraining order. My mother had me when she was just 20, and my biological father was never part of my life. She told me he never wanted kids with her, and since their relationship had only lasted a few months when she got pregnant, she gave him the option to walk away, and he did. Their breakup had been bitter, so she chose not to ask for child support, and he didn't offer it either. It was easier for both of them to move on and never speak again. Thankfully, my grandparents stepped in to support her, and with their help, she managed to finish her education and eventually land a job. She dated a few men when I was little, but around the time I turned 8, she started seeing Harry. They had worked together at some point, and after nearly 3 years of dating, they got married. Harry and I got along fine, not super close, but we didn't clash either. We coexisted peacefully under the same roof. 4 years after their wedding, Mom got pregnant, and everyone, including me, was overjoyed. Looking back, I should have noticed the signs of what was coming, but I was too wrapped up in believing that no matter what, my mom would always be there for me. She had gone through so much while raising me, so I couldn't imagine her ever throwing all that away and turning her back on me. Even when we started drifting apart, and it became clear she was pulling away from me after marrying Harry, I assumed it was just a rough patch. I kept thinking things would go back to normal. So during her pregnancy, I tried to support her as much as I could, but she always seemed irritated by my presence, so I started keeping my distance, hoping it would ease her stress. Apparently, I didn't stay invisible enough. 6 months after she gave birth to twins, she and Harry sat me down for a serious talk. They said that now that they had 2 babies, they couldn't keep me in the house too. I had just turned 16 at the time, still a minor, so they couldn't legally kick me out. Instead, they tried to pressure me gently, going on about how tight their finances were and how hard it was to support such a big family on their income. But I wasn't buying it. Both of them were web developers, and until then, we'd been living comfortably. Supporting 2 adults, a teen and 2 babies, didn't seem impossible. I could tell they were just looking for an excuse to get rid of me. Still, I offered to help. I said I could get a job and contribute if money was the issue. But that's when my mom said something I'll never forget. She told me that more than anything, she wanted to save their money and resources for the kids who deserved it more. Not needed, deserved. She made it clear that the twins had more right to stay with them than I did. That one sentence sealed it for me. I knew I had to leave. I wasn't wanted anymore. They didn't even suggest where I should go. All they did was push me toward the door, knowing full well I had too much pride to stay where I wasn't welcome. So technically they didn't force me out, but they may as well have. They backed me into a corner, made me feel like I had no choice. So I left. That same day, I went straight to my grandparents' house. They were stunned. My grandparents were upset about what my mother had done, but didn't cut ties with her. They still wanted to be involved in the twins' lives. Since they were aging, relying on them financially wasn't an option for me, so I had to get a part-time job at 16. I'd see my mom and Harry now and then when they visited my grandparents with the kids, but they rarely asked about me. Even when we were in the same room, they treated me with stiff politeness, like I was just some distant acquaintance. It didn't seem like they missed me at all. In fact, they looked much happier without me in their lives. My mom, who used to be constantly irritable, now appeared calm and content, and that broke my heart. But there was nothing I could do. I stayed with my grandparents until college started, and even then my mom had nothing to do with helping me. A couple of friends helped me settle into my dorm because my grandparents weren't physically able to do so. I had to take out a student loan, and even that was a struggle. I asked my mom and Harry to co-sign it, but they refused. Same old excuse. They wanted to save their money and energy for the twins' future, since they'd had them later in life. Thankfully, one of my uncles stepped in. He agreed to co-sign as long as I promised he'd never have to pay anything. I worked throughout college, juggling jobs and classes just to stay on top of payments and avoid defaulting. I also wanted a financial head start by the time I graduated. Once college began, my mom and I had no contact. She didn't even show up for my graduation. Only my grandparents came. She didn't call, didn't congratulate me, nothing. After graduation, I moved out so I wouldn't be a burden on my grandparents. The first few years were rough. I wasn't earning much, but I still had to pay rent, buy groceries, keep up with bills, and chip away at my debt. That was what limited income really meant. But thankfully, that's no longer my situation. I worked my way up at the company where I first got hired. It wasn't easy and took years of hard work, but now I'm in a stable, comfortable position. I won't bore you with the details, but I'm proud of where I've landed, especially considering how little help I had getting here. I make a good living, and somehow, despite not being in touch with me for years, my mother found out. I'm nearly 33 now, working in upper management at the same company where I started. I got a major promotion about 4 months ago, an honor I chose to keep private. Only a few people knew. One of them was my uncle, the same one who co-signed my loan. I called to thank him again, and from what I heard, he recently ran into my mom and Harry at a family event. He told her I was doing well, and suggested she reach out to congratulate me. I'm sure his intentions were good, but it backfired. She didn't call to congratulate me, far from it. What actually happened is that she and Harry showed up at my doorstep unannounced, demanding to talk. Like I said, I cut all contact with her after college. Once I graduated, I finally accepted that she wasn't coming around, and there was no use waiting for her to change. So I blocked her everywhere: phone, email, social media, everything, and she didn't seem to care. Honestly, I don't even think she noticed. I barely kept in contact with anyone in my family besides my grandparents. They knew how I felt about my mom, and out of respect, they avoided bringing her up altogether. Anything else from that moment on. As for my uncle, I hadn't really kept in close contact with him either, so I had no idea that my mom and Harry had been struggling financially for the past couple of years. I only found out when they showed up at my doorstep and started explaining how tough things had been for them. The only reason I even let them in was because I thought, naively, that maybe they were finally ready to make amends. But that was just wishful thinking. Instead of congratulating me or even acknowledging my accomplishments, they launched right into how they'd heard from my uncle that I'd received a big promotion and was now one of the youngest people in such a high position at my company. They seemed shocked that I hadn't told them about it. I found that laughable, because why would they expect me to share good news with people who'd completely cut me out of their lives? They said they were disappointed that I had distanced myself from them just because they had chosen to focus on their new family. Apparently, they thought I should have been more mature and understanding about their decision to shift their time, money, and energy to the twins. They even claimed that instead of supporting their decision, I'd pulled away and moved in with my grandparents. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Somehow they were trying to twist the story to make it seem like I was the one in the wrong for being hurt that they chose to push me out of their lives. That was how they decided to reconnect after all these years, by gaslighting me, as if I had overreacted to being kicked out of my own home. Before I even had a chance to respond, they quickly pivoted to the real reason for their visit. They began talking about how they had tried starting a business, but it had failed. They were still drowning in debt, trying to recover. And now, the twins were approaching college age, and they were panicking about how they were going to cover the costs. That's when it finally clicked, why they were here. They needed money. They didn't even try to hide it after that. They told me how they'd initially been offended to learn that I was doing so well without them, but said I could make it up to them by funding my siblings' college education. I was stunned by the audacity. They were trying to make it sound like they were doing me a favor by letting me pay for the education of two people I barely even knew anymore, kids I hadn't seen or spoken to in over a decade. I shut that down immediately. I told them I wasn't going to do any of that, and I found it deeply offensive that they thought they could manipulate me into it. I lost my temper and reminded them that the only reason I had to work all through college and take out loans was because they had refused to help me. They made it clear back then that they wanted to save their money for their real kids, because in their eyes, the twins deserved it more than I ever did. I told them I had accepted that decision without ever begging or bothering them again. I respected their choice, even though it crushed me. But now that they were facing the consequences of that choice, they had no right to expect anything from me, not even a conversation, let alone financial support. I said, if they had saved so much for their twins, they could now use all that saved money to pay for their education. Maybe they should look into all the benefits they'd gained by kicking me out. Surely that had freed up enough resources. Then I calmly told them to leave. I had nothing more to say. That conversation should have never happened. I was foolish to even open the door in the first place. Them into my house in the first place, thinking, foolishly, that maybe they'd finally come to their senses and were here to apologize for how they'd treated me for so many years. but when I started pushing back and told them to leave, they got offended. They claimed I wasn't exactly innocent in all of this either. According to them, back when we all lived together, I was over-enthusiastic and over-involved in their lives, and they found that annoying. I couldn't even wrap my head around that logic. I was a teenager trying to stay connected with a family that was slowly slipping away from me. How was that a valid complaint? Then they tried guilt-tripping me. They said that by refusing to help them now, I was no better than they had been back then. They accused me of forgetting all the years my mother had supported me and raised me alone. They insisted this was my chance to repay her and be a good child by helping her now that she was the one in need. But to me, bringing that up was beyond ridiculous. I was a child then. I had no choice but to rely on her. That's what being a parent is. She wasn't doing me a favor. And as soon as they decided I was old enough to handle things on my own, they pushed me out. Then they ghosted me, completely, for the next 18 years. And now suddenly, they show up and expect me to act like nothing ever happened, to repay some debt they think I owe them. Things got heated after that. The argument turned ugly and personal. I ended up threatening to call the police if they didn't leave my property immediately. Eventually they did go, but not before my mother made one last emotional pitch. She told me she had sacrificed so much for me in her younger years just to be a good mother, and now, for the first and only time, she had expected me to understand that she needed to prioritize others instead of just me. She said I had been selfish for shutting her out for all these years, and was now trying to paint her as the villain. And honestly, it's been messing with my head. I keep asking myself, am I the one at fault? Did I expect too much from her? Or is she just manipulating me into thinking I'm the bad guy? I think I'm right, but just to be completely sure, I decided to post this here on Reddit and ask for objective opinions. I spoke with my uncle and told him clearly that what he did was not okay. Even though I believe his intentions weren't bad, the impact of his actions was undeniably harmful. If he hadn't shared my personal life updates or contact information with my mom without my permission, I wouldn't have ended up in this situation at all. He apologized sincerely and said he had no idea they were struggling financially. Had he known, he never would have told them anything about my life. He also acknowledged that it wasn't his place to get involved, and that if my mother and I wanted to reconnect, we would have done it on our own terms, without his interference. I don't plan on cutting him off. His heart was never in the wrong place, and if it had been, I'd be far more upset. The truth is, he's the reason I was able to go to college at all. No one else was willing to help by co-signing my loan, but he stepped up. If it hadn't been for him, I might not even be where I am today. I can't bring myself to be ungrateful to someone who believed in me when no one else did. As for her, without his support, she wouldn't even have a place to live, let alone money to send her precious twins to college. I made it absolutely clear that if she ever showed up at my job again, I'd file for a restraining order. She didn't say much after that, just hung up, and for now, she hasn't tried to pull anything else. But I know better than to let my guard down. This kind of behavior isn't something you just forgive or forget. Also, I'm not a doormat. That's why I made sure to let my uncle know what he did was wrong. I think I struck the right balance. Firm, but fair. Things between us are fine now. I'm not going to hold this over his head. In fact, I think, in a strange way, I needed this final confrontation to really close the door on that part of my life. I also talked to my grandparents about everything that's been happening. They agree that I've done nothing wrong. They said they'd speak to my mom and try to get her to back off. They've kept in touch with her mostly for the sake of their other grandkids, and I understand that. They sympathize with what she and Harry are going through, but they also believe it's totally unfair to dump all this pressure and guilt on me. That's their stance, and I respect it. It's been about 9 days since I last spoke to my mom, and since then, she's taken it upon herself to email me every other day. Each time, she sends long messages detailing everything she ever did for me, starting from when I was a baby. I guess she's trying to make me feel like I owe her something, but honestly, I don't see the point. Everything she did for me growing up was what any parent is legally and morally supposed to do. It wasn't charity, and it's not like she did it out of unconditional love. The moment I became inconvenient, she cut me off, under the pretense of saving money for their future. Well, here we are. This is the future. The twins are grown now. They should be able to take care of themselves. Or at the very least, their parents should have figured it out without resorting to emotionally manipulating me. At first, I ignored the emails, but a couple of days ago, I finally replied and said everything I've written here. She didn't take it well, started calling me ungrateful again. I told her she could call me whatever she wanted, but it wasn't going to change the facts. I told her point blank, she was a terrible mother, and that's why I wanted nothing to do with her anymore. After that, I blocked her email, but she just made another one and kept going. So I blocked that one too, and I'll keep doing it until she finally understands that I'm not going to sit here and think about her when she never once did the same for me. Honestly, I'm grateful this is all coming to a head now. It's ugly, but I know this is the final purge. The only reason I let her and Harry into my home that day was because part of me still believed they might have changed. Maybe they'd come to make peace. But that illusion is gone now. Talking to them reminded me that they're not the kind of people who can feel remorse, or guilt, or shame. It reopened my eyes to just how manipulative and selfish they really are. I've given up any hope of reconciliation. Completely. Today, my mom actually showed up at my workplace. That might be the wildest thing she's ever done. Thankfully, I wasn't in the office. I had taken the day off because I wasn't feeling well. Thank God I did. I can only imagine the drama she would have caused had I been there. I'm sure she would have thrown a full-blown tantrum to try and humiliate me in front of my co-workers. I found out when the receptionist called and said my mom was at the front desk, demanding to see me. Even after being told I wasn't in, she refused to leave. The receptionist called me directly, and when I heard what was going on, I felt a mix of panic and fury. I told them to put her on the phone. When I got on the line with her, I told her I was at home, and if she pulled another stunt like this, I would sue her into the ground. I warned her that if she ever showed up at my job again, I'd get a restraining order and make sure the law kept her as far away from me as possible. She didn't argue. She hung up. And for now, that's the end of it. But I'm done playing nice. The next time she crosses a line, it'll be the last. I told her that if she kept this up, she might not just lose the chance to send her kids to college, she could end up so ashamed and embarrassed that she wouldn't even let them leave the house. I made sure my tone was firm and intimidating, and judging by her reaction, I think it finally got through to her. She immediately said that she would leave my workplace only if I agreed to meet her in person. I told her she was in no position to be making demands. I knew for a fact that she couldn't afford a lawsuit right now, and if things escalated, even my company wouldn't hesitate to sue her. And believe me, they wouldn't be as lenient as I was trying to be. I told her flat out that it would be in her best interest to just leave quietly and avoid making a bigger scene. After I said that, she handed the phone back to the receptionist. I'm assuming she left because I didn't receive any more calls or messages from my workplace after that. But that incident was way too close for comfort. I cannot afford another situation like that, so I've decided to speak to a lawyer, just to find out what preventive legal measures I can take. I'm not sure if this qualifies for a restraining order since she hasn't exactly threatened me outright, but I'm still going to get legal advice and figure out my options. Until then, I can only hope that this confrontation was enough to make her finally leave me alone. So I guess I don't need to wonder anymore about filing a restraining order, because now, I'm pretty sure we do have grounds for one. Last week, my mother showed up at my workplace. I managed to get her to leave without things escalating. But what happened this week? Honestly, I think anyone in my shoes would have filed a restraining order already. A couple of days ago, I came home from work and saw her standing outside my apartment door. I immediately told her that I wasn't in the mood to argue, and if she didn't leave, I would call the police. I even had my phone in my hand, ready to dial. That's when she ran at me and tackled me to the ground. My phone went flying. She started hitting me, actually trying to beat me up, while cursing nonstop and blaming me for everything that had gone wrong in her life. I was stunned. It took me a few seconds to even react because the whole thing felt so surreal. But once I gathered myself, I fought back. I work out regularly, and I'm much younger than her, so it wasn't hard to overpower her. Thankfully, my neighbors had heard the commotion. They'd already called the police and even came out to help. They physically restrained her while we waited for law enforcement to arrive. Once the cops got there, I chose to press charges. She's now in serious legal trouble. I also met with my lawyer the next day and officially filed for a restraining order against her. From what I've heard through my grandparents, Harry bailed her out. But after that, he left with the twins and went to stay with his parents. Nobody knows if he plans on coming back. Apparently, when he confronted her about the incident, she turned on him too and started a fight. According to my grandparents, she's completely snapped. Look, I know she's going through a rough patch, but that's no excuse for assaulting someone, especially your own child. She's responsible for the mess she's in now, and I refuse to feel sorry for her. The restraining order should come through soon, and honestly, I've been thinking about moving anyway. Now that I'm earning more, I'd been considering upgrading to a bigger place, and this just feels like the right time to finally do it. I've already started looking at listings. I sincerely hope my mother finds a way to deal with whatever she's going through, but at this point, it's just embarrassing to be related to someone like her. Even my grandparents, who've always tried to stay neutral, told me they don't want to associate with her anymore. She's been rude to them too, and they're finally fed up. At the end of the day, she only has herself to blame for everyone walking away from her. And honestly, that's none of my concern anymore.